Hello, and welcome back to Coding with Capo. I'm John Capobianco, and this is a special series presented by CiscoU. Please make sure you watch episode 1. It's only 10-15 minutes long, but it'll bring you up to speed on where we're going to start today. Speaking of today, really exciting episode. We're going to do some really fun things today. Beyond the fun, we're going to do some version and source control. We had a GitHub repository where we started our code and where we committed our code initially. It works, so we want to protect it. We want to control it and make a new version of it and change the source code. Source and version control. We're going to do that using Git. Next, our Python works, but it's not really quite the best Python we can write. So what we're going to do is we're going to transform our working code, which is just a linear serial executed Python script, and we're going to introduce functions. We're going to define a function and wrap our existing code inside of it. We're going to make a new function for today's episode. Then we're going to call those functions. Finally, to show the power of these functions, we're going to take one of the new functions and make a whole new file and see if we can do it as a standalone and reuse our code. I'm excited that you've decided to join me for episode 2. We're going to have a lot of fun today with Google Text to Speech, TTS for short. Now it does exactly what I just said. It takes text and transforms it into speech. That's right, we're going to make our computers talk today. So what we're going to do is incorporate our ChatGPT OpenAI prompts and answers. And let's see if we can turn the answer file into an MP3 file that has a human voice reading the text. Exciting. And we're going to do this in just a few lines of code. So let's get into it. So as you can see, we're on the Coding with Capo GitHub repository. And I have a copy here locally in my IDE, Integrated Development Environment, and I'm on the main branch. And branching is an important part of version and source control. So we're going to make a new branch, and we're going to call this gTTS, Google Text-to-Speech Create Branch. And now you can see I have 2 branches, and they are the same. It's an exact copy. They are not ahead or behind. They're up to date. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our IDE command palette to do a get fetch, and we're going to synchronize our changes, and then we're going to click on main, and now we're going to switch into this branch to protect our code. So now that we've protected our code, we can start our development for today. Now we're going to make a virtual environment to start fresh, and to remind you that we're going to say Python 3m -m venv, and we'll call this episode 2. Now it's going to create a virtual environment that we then have to activate. Source episode 2 bin activate, and you'll know it's activated when the prompt changes to show we're inside of episode 2. Now let's look at our code, and we need the OpenAI and the .env. So these are Python libraries that we're going to use Python's package manager, pip install OpenAI into this virtual environment, pip install python-env, and that handles our environment file where we're hiding our OpenAI key. All right. Now we're also going to introduce our new library, pip install gTTS, Google Text-to-Speech. So now that we have our 3 libraries, let's type clear and clear our terminal. And this is our existing code. Before we do anything with Google, let's add this working code right here. Let's put this, the response here, into a function. All right? So what we're going to do is we're going to type def, and you see how it turns blue here? And we're going to say ask question and put 2 brackets and a colon. Now you can see it underlines, it complains, because of Python this isn't indented properly after this colon. So I've selected in front of these lines and I'm going to press tab, and that's going to make everything happy. Now I need to do the same thing for the rest of my code in this function, and I'm going to tab it all over, and we're going to make this function do the same thing. Take the question and ask the question. Now one thing that we want to do is we get this result that we print to the screen. Well, what if we could make this function return that result? So if someone calls this function, it will return the answer from the question that was asked. All right? So this would all work, and I believe it should still work, but what we need to do is call this function, right? So what we're going to do is say answer equals ask question. And then what we could do is print the answer. So let's do this before we move along. So I'm going to move this up, and we're going to say Python 3, and let's save this file. ChatGPT, I'm not in the folder, excuse me. What is this folder? Coding with Capo. Sorry about that. Python 3, ChatGPT client. Now it should ask me my question, so the code is still working. Let's say, where is Toronto, and could you describe the city for me? Enter. And let's just make sure our code works all the way to the end. And what we're hoping to do is, right, we've called answer, which has prompted the ask question function. We know it's working because it's thinking about it, and hopefully we can print the answer. And then we'll move on to adding the Google text-to-speech. So we have our answer from ChatGPT. We asked ChatGPT, where's Toronto, and could you describe the city for me? Here's their response. Toronto is a city located in the province of Ontario, Canada. It's one of the largest and most populous cities in Canada, and serves as the capital of the province of Ontario. You get the idea. Now, can we turn this text, or the next question and answer that we ask it, into an MP3 file? So we're going to go to the top of our file here very quickly, and what we're going to do is say from gTTS import G capital TTS. All right. Now it doesn't require any keys or anything, which is a wonderful aspect of this tool. Now what we're going to do is, let's do this backwards. Now that we have an answer, let's do this. Let's say create MP3, passing it the answer. And then we're going to delete the print answer. Actually, let's still have it print the answer. So then, oh, I see. I'm wondering which print result it did here. It did this print. So let's pass it the answer to a new function called create MP3. So define create MP3 with result inside of that function, because what we're going to do is pass answer in. Now what we need to do is be tabbed in, and what we're going to do is pick our language equals EN for English, and we're going to say MP3 output. The output equals a formatted string passing in the result. And we might not even need this line. Let's not do this line. What we can do is pass it right into MP3 equals gTTS, right, invoking the class that we've imported here, which takes in a few things. It takes in text, which in this case is going to be the formatted string of the result. And what we want is the language to equal that language we set up above. So now we have an MP3 file. So let's mp3.save this file as an F string with our question.mp3. Now this is going to be a lot of fun, and I have to close this function here. So what we're saying is we're setting our language, we're going to save an mp3 file passing the result from ChatGPT, and then we're going to create this mp3 file, and then we're going to take a listen to it. So let's save this file, and we're going to run it again, and our new question is going to be, what is the tallest place on Earth, and please describe it for me. Enter. Now we're going to take a break while this thinks about it, but what we're going to come back to is an mp3 file. Now, as you can see, we've asked it the question, we have the answer, and now we have this mp3 file. It's a minute long, so let's listen to some of the
tallest place on Earth is Mount Everest. Located on the border of Nepal and Tibet, China in the Himalayan mountain range. Mount Everest has an elevation of 29,029 feet, 8,848 meters, making it the highest point on Earth above sea level. The mountain features rocky terrain, snow and ice year-round, and unpredictable weather conditions that make it a challenge to climb.
So you get the idea. There's still 30 seconds left, but what we've done here is set our language, created a variable called mp3, which we invoke the gTTS class, passing it our text, which in this case is the result from ChatGPT, and the language we want, and then we save the mp3 file. Again, we invoke this with two new lines of Python. One, the answer, which asks the question, and two, the create mp3 file, which passes the answer. Now, what I think is neat about code, and let's make a new file. We're going to say select language of Python, and we're going to split our screen and see if we can make something new. So we know this works, right? Our function, and we know we can invoke it passing it an answer. Now, answer can be anything. So let's pass it something different, and let's steal some code from up above. Let's make a question or an input, let's say. Right? So what we're going to do is we're going to put an input. Now, what do we need from here? We need gTTS for sure. And let's bring in operating system just in case. I don't think we need it. See, we don't really need it. So let's import gTTS and input, and let's set a variable here as transform to mp3 equals that input. And what we're going to say is, what do you want transformed to an mp3? And we're going to change the answer to create mp3. Now let's save this file as just text to speech. And what we're going to try, and I don't see, okay, see question here? It has to be the transform. So the text here, result, save, we don't have a question. So what we're going to save here as text to speech, mp3. And that does not need to be a formatted string. So let's try it. Python 3, text to speech. What do you want transformed to an mp3? Thank you for joining me this episode of Coding with Capo. Please try this at home. Enter. And now I think I should have text to speech.
Thank you for joining me this episode of Coding with Capo. Please try this at home.
And thank you so much for joining me this week. Now to finish up, what we need to do is bring this code into our repository. So I'm going to close all the files. I know everything works, and I'm going to delete the mp3 files because I don't need those as part of the repository, just the code. Now, very important, if you do not have a get ignore file, please make sure you have one with .env to protect your environment file so it doesn't end up in the repository. Now if we click this branch, you can see that we've made some changes to one file and we have a whole new file. All right, so we're going to commit this and say adding text to speech. Save that file, close everything up, and sync changes. So now we're going to go back into our repository. See, GitHub knows I have pushes less than a minute ago. So we're going to compare the pull request. And here we can actually look at, we're going to create a pull request. And here I can look at the files changed and see what was changed. And here it shows me what was added and what was removed, right? And then what I'm going to do is merge the pull request and confirm it and delete this branch because I'm done with it. And now if we go back into coding with Capo, you can see in the main branch, and if I switch this back to main, you can see that I'm going to have changes. When I refresh this, there's my new file. So we've done successful version and source control. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I had a lot of fun, and you can do a lot with this. We have now enhanced our ChatGPT to make an MP3 of the answer and a standalone input to MP3 file. So have some fun with this. Get your children and friends and teachers and colleagues involved. Python is fun and easy, as you've seen. We've done some amazing things in 10 or 15 minutes. So I'll see you next time, and I'm going to try to keep coming up with some fun, crazy things that we can do with Python and coding with Capo.